Hello Internet and welcome to another tutorial video for Cataclysm Dark Days Ahead. In this episode we will be talking about the consume menu, which shockingly allows you to consume items from the game. This is where you will eat and drink, but it is not just for consuming things by eating them. That is a confusion we see from players. Sometimes they will ask about items that appear in this menu that are not traditional food or drink. Instead, I recommend you think of this as the consume menu applying to other consumables beyond what is actually edible. Bandages, for instance, can be applied in the consume menu. And of course you should probably not eat bandages, so that leads to some confusion. But anyway, there's a bunch of information on this screen and I wanted to explain what they all mean, so let's just jump into it. You can access the consume menu by pressing the capital E key by default. Now the amount of information displayed in this panel will depend on what you have in your inventory and on the tiles adjacent to you. For instance, if I'm standing in an empty area and the only consumable I have in my inventory is a bandage, then the window will not display calories or quench like it would for food items. The only information that is consistent regardless of the item would be the name, the shelf life, volume, and consume time of that item. Now at the top of this screen you will also see relevant information about your character. This will show if you're hungry or thirsty or things like that, which will allow you to make a more informed decision about what you need to consume. This menu is also organized in a couple different ways. First up, you will see the items in your inventory broken down into categories. Now the two main categories for this menu are food and drink because the bulk of consumables exist as those two types. Then, depending on what is near you, there will also be other tiles displayed underneath your inventory. So your inventory will be listed at the top and adjacent tile contents will be shown below, and they all should have a little tag attached to them indicating where they are in relation to your character. Then each item in each subheading will be sorted based on their shelf life. This means that soon-to-rot food will be displayed at the top and shelf-stable food will be displayed at the bottom. For things that have the same spoilage duration, they will then be displayed in alphabetical order. This is how things are typically ordered, though some things may change with certain circumstances. In this image, for instance, my morphine is displayed at the bottom of this menu and is grayed out because it requires a syringe to be applied, which I don't have. So it is not displayed alphabetically as it normally would be. Now this will also occur for items that cannot be consumed in their current form but appear in this menu anyway. An example of this would be flour or powdered eggs. Now as far as I know, there is no way for you to change the way that this menu is sorted, and that can be kind of annoying when you have a base filled with many items. I will often step over to a corner where I don't have items in order to consume things from my inventory because it makes that menu much smaller. You can search through this window though, so using the / key will allow you to quickly jump to an item you're looking for, and that is pretty valuable when you have a lot of stuff laying around. Other than that, you can navigate this menu by moving your cursor up and down using the arrow keys, and you can press return to consume the item that is currently highlighted by your indicator. If the item needs to be applied to a specific body part like bandages, this will then open another pop-up window. Other items may give you warnings that they will make you sick if you eat or drink them, which will again pop up a little window. Instead of pressing enter on an item, you can also type its corresponding letter or number, although not every item will be assigned something in this way. Additionally, this menu allows for mouse selection, so you can actually click on something if you want to do that. And again, just to stress, navigate using the arrow keys. If you try to use the numpad to move, it will consume whatever item is assigned to that number key. You cannot use them to move in this menu. Despite this, however, the number controls are still listed in the question mark menu as viable, but you should not use them. Actually, let's not go over every single control of this menu. You can press the question mark key as mentioned to view a list of controls relevant to this screen. Now on the left side of the screen you will see the name of the item as well as the character assigned for selecting it. Pressing the corresponding key to that symbol will consume the item. A number displayed in parentheses will show how many portions of that item you currently have. To be clear, this is the number of portions, not how many containers of the item you possess. So a bottle of green tea, for instance, is one bottle, but it is 2 portions, so it's displayed as 2 portions in this menu. There are also tags that get assigned to food items such as fresh or old or hot or cold, and these speak to the status of that item. Hot and cold increase morale for certain food items, and old means that the food will soon rot. Now most of these are very self-explanatory. I really don't expect you to struggle very much with these tags. And additionally, some food items will be color-coded to show different things. Red typically means that it's harmful to you in some way, usually because it conflicts with a food allergy trait that you have. Milk will appear in red for lactose intolerant characters, for instance. Yellow items are old and will be spoiling in the very near future. When they do spoil, they will become brown in this menu and they will get a tag for being rotten. You should, probably not eat rotten items. This pink or purple color means that you're currently nauseated and eating that food may make you vomit. And items that are color-coded blue seems to kind of be a catch-all category. And then these gray or white colors mean that the food is completely shelf-stable. Medical items and the like will typically appear as this color, at least in the majority of circumstances, because they will never go rotten. Just to pop in here as the editor, I was watching this as I was editing the video and I noticed that some blue items still had indefinite shelf life. So earlier when I said that white items had indefinite shelf lives, that's probably not connected to the color coding. It looks like blue is attached to food items and white is attached to medical items, so it doesn't actually connect as far as I can tell to the shelf life of the item. Just wanted to pop in here as the editor and say that because it doesn't seem to be consistent with what I thought the color coding actually meant. Anyway, that's enough time wasted about colors, so let's continue here. Now the following columns, as I mentioned, will not be displayed on all consumables. The information displayed here will depend on what is nearby or in your inventory, but I will be going over all of the columns that I know exist. So first up we have calories. This is pretty straightforward. This is a number, positive or negative, I'm pretty sure it's always positive, that will show you how many calories will be gained by eating that item. Some items that are not food still have a calorie count. For instance, if you were desperate, you could eat some of these things to get calories. I actually don't want to give an example here because all the ones that I know of that are like this are spoilers, but the point is that you can sometimes eat non-food items and still gain some amount of calories. Also, despite the fact that numbers here are displayed with a plus sign, I can't think of any food in the game that has a negative calorie count as of the time of this recording. If you were to find a negative item in the future, that would mean it actually removes calories from your body somehow rather than adding them. Anyway, calories is a pretty straightforward column. I don't have much to explain here. Next up, we have the Quench column. This is how much the item will slake your thirst. Now, unlike calories, Quench is not an exact metric that uses a real-world counterpart. For instance, if we wanted to make a new food item, we could actually track a real-world value for calories and just input that in the game. Quench does not have any comparable metric. As such, your only frame of reference will be comparison to other drink items in the game. Waters tend to have the highest Quench values, around 50 or 60, and are the easiest drinks to obtain, so you'll probably be drinking them a lot. Now, some items do have a negative Quench to show that they will make you thirsty when you eat them. Alcohol and dry foods tend to have negatives here, and you'll typically be consuming those for other benefits rather than satisfying your thirst. This column is also color-coded, so you can see at a glance whether something you're about to eat or drink is going to give you a positive or negative impact to your thirst. Our next column here is for joy. Now, the joy of an item will contribute to your character's morale, something that we will definitely be covering in a different video. The gist of this joy column, though, is that positive values here make your character happy and negative values make them sad. Consumables are one of the easiest ways to manipulate your character's morale, which will in turn affect your character's ability to learn skills. So yeah, morale, kind of important, not something you'll think about every time you eat an item, but when you need it, it is there. Anyway, most consumables will be in a small range of 1 to 5 for positive values, and then negative impacts from joy can be pretty significant and they vary significantly depending on the item. I don't have much to say about this, although this column is also color-coded for you to easily look through. Our next column is for health. Now again, health is going to need to get its own video and we're not going to discuss it at length here. This column will show an abstracted idea of how this consumable will impact your health stat. Basically, health is a vague means of tracking how healthy the player character is, and most of the consumables in the game have completely arbitrary numbers attached to them. It is, if I'm being perfectly honest, a pretty bad system. Now this column will show plus signs for positive health impacts and minus signs for negative. The more symbols that there are in this entry, the more extreme the change will be to your health. If there's nothing displayed here, then that item does not have an impact on your health stat. Try to avoid super unhealthy things, but eating them on occasion is fine. It's rare that you'll pay attention to this column, but when you need to, again, it is there. Alright, so popping in here as the editor, everything we just talked about will apply to older versions of the game. However, about a week ago, they started reworking the health system. So in the future, health is going to work differently, and what that means in the context of the things that we just talked about is that food no longer has a positive positive buff to health. So all food items that you find will now either be locked at 0 health and be completely neutral, or they will be -1. Other consumables that are not food may still have a positive or negative effect on your health. Some of them can significantly alter your health, but food items will not. And the health episode was supposed to be the next one in this series, so that's just a lot of work that I did down the drain, hours of work. But yeah, let's just go back to the original video here. Now next up we have shelf life. This shows how long an item will last if it is outside of a sealed container. Again, this menu sorts by this value first, so shortest shelf life foods will be shown at the top of this menu. Now, if the food item comes in a sealed container like a tin can, then this shelf life will not tick down until the can is opened. You can see if it's in a sealed container on the far right of this column where the word sealed is displayed. Now, for the purposes of gameplay, anything with a shelf life of several seasons, you can pretty much treat that as infinite because very few players will be in the game for that long. Anything with a truly indefinite shelf life will be listed as indefinite in this menu. Additionally, there are some food items in the game that should definitely have a shelf life, but they don't. Animal cooking oil, for instance, would go rancid over time, but for some reason in the game it does not have a shelf life. Now our next column is for volume. This is the size of the food item and is your metric for understanding how much space the food would occupy in your stomach. Now, since stomach volume is used to determine hunger, eating foods with large volume will sate your hunger more than low volume foods. However, it's not quite that straightforward. There is a system behind the scenes in Cataclysm that changes a food's volume to reflect that it's been chewed up. This means that most of the time, the volume listed here actually gets reduced when the food is fully in your stomach. And this column does not reflect that masticated value, instead it just shows the overall volume of the food. However, the next column, Satiety, does take this into account. Now the Satiety bar here is a visual representation of how calorically dense a food item is. So what does that mean exactly? Well, basically low volume, high calorie food will have more green bars in this menu, and low calorie, high volume food will barely have any bars at all. Now this density is represented by up to 5 green bars. Straight bars count as a full bar, and a diagonal bar represents a half-filled bar. Now as I said, this representation takes into account the volume change from chewing and swallowing the food, so this is the best way to see how calorically dense the food is. Now the highest ranked things you will see here would be foods that have a tiny volume but decent calories, and they are the most optimal foods to eat when you're trying to add more calories to your system. An example of this would be bacon. Bacon is one of the most calorie-dense foods in the game, at least that I'm aware of. The very low volume means you can eat more of that item before your stomach becomes full, so finding a low-volume, high-calorie food is great for min-maxing. Now, I don't really min-max. I prefer to eat like a normal human being, but you know, this game seems to draw a lot of people who only want to do the most optimal thing, so this area of the menu will help you do that. Next up, we have consume time. So this is the time that it will take in theory to consume the item. For food items, this is pretty straightforward. In many cases, you'll be opening a can or chewing the food, which will take time. For medication type items, this is how long it will take you to apply or consume that material. Now, I did say in theory, and that is because this is often confusing and a bit misleading. Some items have ridiculous consume times that don't really fit the item in question, and then there are some items that are just plain broken. In a recent playthrough, for instance, I saw that bandages have a consume time in this menu of 15 seconds. However, in their item entry, it shows that it should take 300 moves, which is 3 seconds. And then, when I actually used the bandage in the game, it took about 40 seconds. Now, obviously, there was something not working correctly there, so I would be skeptical of any number listed in this menu. But the reality is that this is pretty easily avoided by simply not consuming items in combat. You should be in a position of relative safety before you eat or drink, and although there are emergencies where medication items must be taken, it should be avoided at all costs. But frankly, if you're dying of blood loss and you really need to apply some hemostatic powder, you really should probably do that regardless of how long it will take. And then finally here we have the column labeled Freshness. Now the only thing I have ever seen appear in this column is the word sealed, which will let you know if a food item is in a sealed container or not. There's really not much to say about that. That is all that this does. And with that, I think we've covered the functionality of this menu. You will be using this in the game very often since you know you need to eat and drink to stay alive. If I had to stress any one particular thing, I guess it would be that you should be using the search functionality often. It will save you through flipping through page after page after page of items. And internet, I think that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video. Hit me with a thumbs up or a subscription if you feel so inclined. And hey, if you made it this far, leave me a little comment. Let me know that you watched the whole thing. It's pretty rare that a viewer actually sticks around to the end of the video. But alright, I'll be back with more tutorial content in the near future, and I will see you next time.